Hey, what's up, Liron here, and in this video we're going to talk about composition, drawing, and inking. So a bit of a different one, and I want to show you a process I did, but the process isn't mandatory to listen to my words. I'm going to add some text to accompany the process, but I want to talk about the general ideas. So basically you can even listen to this without looking at the video all throughout, okay? So I want to talk about how to build an artwork, whether it's a drawing or a painting. In this example, it's going to be a drawing that's finalized and inked, and how to do that in a way that leads to a good, correct result. Okay, now one of the main concepts that I like to talk about is working from large to small. And this is incredibly important. When you want to draw something, paint something, create a final result, whether it's a landscape or it's a character or something like that, you want to start from the larger general shapes and work from those into the more specific. The reason why is that it really is sometimes impossible to know where to place everything. So you don't know exactly where that eyebrow is going to sit or where a different part of your sketch or painting is going to be. So you want to start general, very light. There's a lot of uncertainty. So you want to start from that and then slowly close in on the details. Look at how I placed in some very general guidelines for his body. This is Guts. It's a character from my favorite manga, Berserk. And notice how, again, I put all of the outlines for the head, for the shoulders, for the hand that's going to grab a sword. All of these things, just generally knowing where they are, helps me to not make a huge mistake and then come back and revisit it later on and have to fix everything. Because the more we move forward in the process, the more you're going to have to fix in the case you make a mistake. So ideally, you want to make sure to eliminate as many of these as possible. And you see me erasing, you see me fixing mistakes, especially with the eye in particular. It's a very expressive, obviously, part of the character, the eyebrows and the eye, and even how the pupils and everything is and the eyelids. It's all really responsible for the feeling we get from looking at it. And these are very subtle differences. And basically, I'm drawing based on an existing drawing, but when I have to make these things up, there's a lot of challenge involved in that. Now, I'm placing in some preparations for later. What you see me do again is building the general shape, then moving in and focusing on the small details. But what you have to remember in this particular example is that this one is going to be inked. Okay, if I'm working on a sketch that is to be inked, just like if I'm working on a sketch that is to be painted, some modifications are required. First, we're definitely not finalizing in pencil because we're going to finalize using a different medium. In this case, ink. In other cases, it could be paints, it could be a lot of markers, it could be a lot of things. Now, for the purpose of inking, what's important for me, and the approaches vary, but to me it's important to know exactly what I'm going to do with the pen and ink. Okay, I love the approach of leaving some things for later interpretation, but I do feel like there needs to be a very strong basis for me personally to know what to do. And it's very different from paint and painting, by the way. If you've been following my stuff, you know that for the sake of painting, I can go with very little and still get the result I want. I think it's a matter of skill and practice for the most part. But for the purpose of inking, mainly I want to know where the lines are, not scratchy lines. You want to get the lines to be as accurate as you can. I also want to know where the light and shadow are going to be. So I'm going to draw, and you see now a lot of indications for the placement of light and shadow, and just to figure out really where I want everything to be. Later on with the pen, you don't really want to think about the logic behind things. You want to think more in terms of the technique of the pen. Same goes many times for watercolor. You want to be free in the watercolor stage. So I would say do a sketch that is just enough to set you free. And nothing more than that. Okay, and you will go overboard, you will go overworked. I can't count the amount of times I went too detailed with the pencil, and it ended up making the work much more stale and boring. Okay, now we're going to jump into the inking stage now. Basically, if you're not looking, I'm just going to explain. I'm using a nib pen, the type you dip into ink. This one's called a G-Pen. It's very common for the manga style. It has this touch of a lot of line control and variety and width, but there are plenty of other pens that will work. I'm also using more of a standard Staedtler kind of fine point pens. I'm using all sorts of tools. And I actually want to talk about that for a moment. I see this a lot in watercolor, and also just generally, people tend to obsess over materials. I don't want you to do that. It's more about obsess about finding the materials you enjoy. Okay, so try a bunch of stuff out, but don't worry about how other people do it necessarily. And I know this is going really meta and really macro, but I think it is an important concept. You don't really want to worry about how other people do it or get the exact same technique or the exact same color brands. God forbid, that's taking it way too far. What you want to understand is what works for you to achieve the result you want. For me personally, with watercolor, I feel like I really was able to find that. And now I'm finding my way around the sketching, inking, and all of that, kind of a different world. I will mention that there are also digital tools. Like I have the drawing tablet, Huion Canvas. I'm really happy with it. And with that, you can do all sorts of different things. There's also different work processes. You can work on a very basic sketch, make it up on paper, and then ink it digitally. You can do the whole inking digitally and then work on different elements on the computer. You can do a lot of things, but the key is to find the process that works for you. So for me personally here, I love this sense of different line widths with the G-Pen. I love that it can produce this interesting sense of depth, and you will see this in a moment, because when inking, and this is a concept that can be used in almost any medium, a part of the composition is edges. Now in watercolor, one of the biggest things you can do is to play around with them, make them blurry, more blended, make them less prominent, more prominent. Now with pen and ink, you don't get to play much with blending. You don't even get to play with values for that matter, because blending is just a gradual transition from light to dark. What you do get to work with is line width and shape. And this is actually something that plays a big role in inking. And I know a lot of people love that technique of pen and inking and line and wash, what you'd call when you mix inking and pen and ink with paint. So for that matter, I think one of the regarding this technique, one of the means at your disposal is line width. And with very skilled inkers, you will see this play a major role. Even when they're doing mixed media work, you will see that the lines are clever. And it can be very subtle very often. It means that one of the lines is going to be really thin. Like, look at the shape. If you're looking, you can see that the chin is a little thicker and the side of the face is a little thinner. So this variation can create a sense of three-dimensionality, depth. Also, when you layer in elements that are closer to you, you go a little thicker on the lines, and it makes them pop towards you, and you can achieve amazing effects this way. And what I love about it is, if you think about it this way, paint and color in general has way more options than black and white. But I tend to love the limitation. So if you can limit yourself in the technique, I find that it can bring out of you new things, new elements. I think there is some certain magic in limitation, and I talked about it, I believe, in a recent video, and I will make another one. So if you can limit yourself to fewer colors, maybe to just one color, maybe to just to one brush, like try inking with a huge big sized nib that requires more control for the thin lines, or try going with a very thin one. This is good because A, it helps you, and by the way, check this shaky line out. A, it helps you become more familiarized with a large variety of materials and tools, and B, I think you will be surprised at what you can produce when you have these limitations. Okay, so for this specific work, all I get to work with is just pencil and pen and ink. And by the way, I love the idea of working directly with pen. That's another limitation. And think about it this way: working directly with a pen is a limitation of a different kind, because it forces you to get the lines right the first go. Now, it may seem like something that's very high pressure. Not necessarily. I find that when I go directly with pen, my line quality improves because I know that this line is the final line. I'm not going to be able to fix it too much. And there is an element of letting go with that because once you don't care as much, you know, okay, if I mess up immediately. Something about it leads to more spontaneous results. This is something I talked about a lot when I used to do the spontaneous sketches series, and I hope to do more of these in the future, but there's something to that final line that is really beautiful. Now, with what I'm doing right now, I can fix it in the computer. I can scan it, edit it, fix some lines, but even if I didn't have these means it would even be better because that's it. That's the final line. And in the grand scheme of things, if your overall trajectory, your overall direction is correct, meaning the composition from the get-go was smart, the things you did are correct, it won't matter. No one will notice if you make a small mistake here and there with the line work, you know. Now, you do see me work with the brush, and this is the water brush, the type that you often use with watercolor. But I actually love it so much, and it's great for this style I'm going for, which is manga. It's a bit different, black and white, Japanese comic. This kind of a brush pen works well for this. And if I was stuck in my ways and think, oh, this is a tool for watercolor, like I would never have thought of trying it out. But when I looked at the reference, I knew that this would be a good tool to achieve this effect. So I just went for it. And it turned out perfect. And by the way, I'm using the ink. I'm using I don't know what you'd call it, India ink, I think. I'm using this pen with the ink, and it works perfectly well. It has no issues whatsoever, even though it's meant for watercolor, or is more often used, at least in the world I come from, for watercolor. And look at the beautiful, very dirty effects of the light and shadow. I love this kind of a thing. Now, we're really at the final stretch of this process here, just adding some final details. You want to know when to stop, but I find that very often that's not a problem for me. I know when to stop. And when you're doing a study based on existing work, that solves it for you because you see when your work turns into something similar with the existing work. Now I'm erasing all the pencil lines and I'm showing you the final result now up close. I hope you enjoyed this kind of a video. I just decided to jump straight into it and no too much introduction or outro. Just showing you the process and talking about a few of the insights I had along the way and just generally. So let me know your thoughts in a comment down below, and I do hope you enjoyed this one. I will see you again in the next one.